Welcome everyone to this session, which is, I think, a little bit different than some of the other sessions that are being conducted at this year's summit. This session, as the title says, thinking globally about access to energy. So it's a little bit of a different construct, a little bit of a different problem. It is specifically not a US-centric discussion that we're having, and I think that's very much fitting that we also don't have a US-centric panel sitting up on stage here. So this is a chance to think a little more broadly about some of the technologies, some of the business models, some of the markets that might exist for technologies that are going to be developed in this country, but nonetheless have an impact that is much more broad and perhaps much more important. It's interesting when we think back to the discussion this morning. So Bill Gates made the point during his presentation and during the fireside chat, linking the human condition intimately with energy intensity over time. And that's what we're really talking about with developing nations. If we think about what the critical needs are for the human condition: feed me, water me, educate me, keep me healthy, and make me safe. If you can deliver these 5 things, then the human condition is much improved. Each of these things is inexorably linked to energy. So access to energy for all advances the human condition explicitly and implicitly. Secretary Chu went on. He mentioned that solar and batteries could help leapfrog developing nations and energy in developing nations. And if we could just reduce the cost of solar, if we could just reduce the cost of energy storage, then developing nations would be perfectly set up to leapfrog. I would argue they're already there. I would argue there are already deployments going on in developing nations using technology that exists today, which nonetheless could be advanced to improve the penetration, to improve the market size. But there are examples that exist today of companies profitably deploying these technologies to give energy access for all. Companies like D-Light, that is distributing LED lighting to Africa at a profit. Simpa networks that have a pay-as-you-go access to solar energy that has been distributed across multiple countries in Africa. Indigo, very similar, an OPV startup company that is in Africa but not using their own technology because they actually see it as being a route to 3 to 4 years' time to deploy OPV. They're using someone else's but using interesting business models to deploy these types of technologies, again, to provide global access to energy for all. We even heard about some examples today in Arun Majunda's presentation. The team at Shetak with their refrigeration technology providing cooling capability to people in India to allow them improved healthcare, to allow them improved food storage, again, to improve the fundamental human condition. So the answer then is, what technology development do we need to have? What market models need to exist? What business models need to exist? We don't need to talk about the levelized cost of electricity. We don't need to talk about grid parity because there is no electricity and there is no grid. What we're talking about and what the panelists will talk about today is a levelized cost of the human condition. How much wallet share can you pick up by offering an improved human condition, whether it be food, water, health, education, or safety? The amount they pay from a very small wallet is nonetheless going to be implied for an improved human condition. And we've got a great panel that's going to be able to address this from a number of different angles. We've got representatives from a multinational corporation, from an international finance vehicle, an academic, as well as a lifetime achiever in the business of deploying interesting technologies in developing nations. And last but not least, a leader, an executive within Masdar, who will be able to tell us about some of the activities that are going on in that organisation and in developing nations that Masdar is leading. So with that, I'll introduce the first mini speaker. Johanna Wellington is from GE's Research Centre, which I'm intimately familiar with, fortunately or unfortunately enough. She leads the Advanced Technology Program for sustainable energy. It's one of multiple advanced technology programs that exist within the GE Research Centre, but nonetheless a critical one for the topic of discussion we're talking about today. So with that, Johanna.
Thank you, Chris. Chris asked me if I'd just spend 5 to 10 minutes to talk a little bit about GE, our role in this topic, and kind of introduce some general thoughts about the area. As Chris mentioned, I do work at our Global Research Center. I tell everybody I've got one of the best jobs that there is. My job is to pay attention to the long-term energy trends and make sure that GE has pipeline technology in the pipeline so that we will be successful 5-10 years out. And so I do have a fairly broad portfolio of advanced energy and water research, some of which we'll talk about today. GE's Research Center is headquartered in Niskayuna, New York, and it's probably where the bulk of our researchers reside. However, we do have research centers around the world, including China, India, Germany, and a new one opening up in Brazil. And I really appreciate these resources being on our team as we think about global access to energy, because you can't underestimate the local knowledge that brings. It shouldn't just be folks sitting in developed nations thinking about bringing global access to developing nations. It's the perspective of folks that actually live and breathe those global developing regions are very helpful in helping us understand some of the local issues. Historically, there's been significant challenges to access to energy. There's significant reasons why the developed country model of centralized generation may not work in developing regions. There's a lack of infrastructure, not just grid infrastructure, but if you're thinking about, for example, combined cycle power plants, you need a natural gas pipeline. If you've got a coal plant, you need a railroad or some way of getting that coal to wherever it is you're going to burn it. Limited grid connectivity is an obvious one. And if you're thinking about, extending the grid, low power density is a huge issue. So it may not be economically viable to bring the power grid to all rural areas where you may have, a third or even less of the power demand that you would have in a developed region. Certainly environmental and emissions aspects have come into play. Historically, some of the distributed generation technologies have had higher emissions than others. I'm not sure that that's true today, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. But it is certainly something that we should consider. Theft, something that we might not think about in the developed world, but certainly is a big issue in the developing nations. As you start to bring power online, there are some issues with theft of that power. And although not specifically in my area of expertise being a technologist, but there are certainly other non-technology issues, government policy, financing, who actually is the customer, who's going to own it, operate it. Sometimes these barriers can be just as hard to overcome, and wanted to acknowledge them. Perhaps it's easiest to see where the dichotomy lies in terms of access, global access to energy, by looking at a map of the world at night as taken from space. It's clear to see the developing regions and the areas of the world that are lacking in electricity. Particularly Africa is probably one of the largest regions of the world where close to 1 million people do not have access to power or access to reliable power. But certainly other areas of the world, India, China, South America, are clear as well. And I just wanted to talk about, and I could probably spend all day talking about it, so I'm just going to highlight several technologies. I do think technologies today offer opportunities that did not exist a decade ago. A decade ago, particularly renewable energies, the costs have come down significantly. It was even highlighted during this morning's discussion. Solar energies are about 25% of the cost that they were a decade ago, maybe not even. Wind is half the cost. If you look at Africa, for example, which we just highlighted as one of the areas that lacks power, it actually is fairly rich in solar resources. In fact, a solar panel in Africa would produce twice as much power as a solar panel in Germany, which has one of the most dense solar regions. It's not because of their great sun, but here in Africa, it's actually fairly great. In fact, the EU Commission recently released a study about renewable energy in Africa, and it identified that in many regions in Africa, solar is economically viable in terms of supplying electricity at a very low cost. And in fact, in many regions, it beats diesel power, which exists today. Wind power is another great option. It's, again, costs have dropped significantly and is capable of providing distributed resources. There's lots of areas in Africa, particularly northern Africa, is also very abundant in wind resources. So in this EU study and some of our own internal studies as well show that this could be just as viable as traditional fossil-based sources of energy today. We had a lot of discussions earlier today about all the great work that I'm sure many of you in the audience are doing around energy storage and some of the research that we're doing as well, which is projected to significantly lower those costs. This is a great asset in terms of you're looking at particularly renewable power generation. It is a variable load, and combining it with energy storage could be a great viable alternative. And one other thing I just wanted to point out before I exit stage left is microgrids. We've done some work ourselves in microgrids. I think that's growing. If you think about a conventional grid or grid in a developed world, it's great because you can kind of load balance. You can balance renewable energy with other sources of load. There are some great technologies which are evolving and are available today that allow us to do this on a distributed nature as well. You don't necessarily have to have a gigantic grid in order to balance those. You can tie in energy storage, renewable, and gas recip engines all together. So I think there are some great opportunities that exist today that did not exist a decade ago. I think it's a great time to be talking about global access to energy. In fact, the United Nations identified 2012 as the year of sustainable energy for all, and I think there's a great reason to do that. So looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Next we have from Masdar, Dr. Nawal Al-Hosany, who has a couple of different responsibilities at Masdar, and she'll be able to explain the breadth and depth that Masdar actually has. I think it's bigger than most people realize in terms of some of the activities that are occurring. So the two roles that Nawal has is the Director of Sustainability for Masdar as a whole, but then a separate activity as the Director of the Zayed Future Energy Prize, which recognises leading innovators, whether at the corporate level or at the NGO level, on an annual basis, really calling out the people that are making a difference. But I'll leave Nawal to explain more about Masdar's activities.
Hello everybody. I am, as Chris said, I present Masdar, and Masdar is much more than what most people in this room knows. Masdar is known to be Masdar City in many cases, or Masdar Institute in other cases, but Masdar actually is a more than that. Masdar is a fully, in a way, unique, integrated entity or initiative that addresses renewable energy from different aspects. Our mission is very simple. It's basically advancing renewable energy. But to do that, we are looking at it from education, research and development, commercialization, investment and adaptation. And to do that, we have built a company, our initiative, that has different elements, different aspects through different business units. So we have Masdar Institute, Science and Technology, and a lot of people I've met today actually work very closely with Masdar Institute, because Masdar Institute has been built or designed in collaboration with MIT. Most of our staff are basically either seconded or trained by MIT, and our curriculum and our activities is in full collaboration with MIT. We have, and it is just for those of you who don't know, it is a postgrad university. It is focused on renewable energy and sustainable development, and we have masters and PhD students from basically all over the world. Its program is based on a full scholarship, so our students come to be our guests. We pay for the tuition fees, we pay for their accommodation, we pay everything for them just to be focused on their research and their projects. All what we care about is basically the development of the research in the renewable energy and sustainable development. We have Masdar Capital, which is an investment arm, Masdar investment arm to invest in renewable energy and again in sustainability across the world. We have two funds operating currently, and we have a lot of success in some of our investments. And we have a team back in Abu Dhabi that travels the world to identify opportunities with different partners. We have Masdar Power. Masdar Power is focusing on building renewable energy utility scale renewable energy plants in the UAE and across the world. Example of our operational now actually plants is Khema Solar in Spain, which is it's an innovative in its approach because it's the first of its kind CSP plant that operates 24 hours. We have we're building our first CSP plant in the UAE, and we built already our Masdar PV, which is in Masdar City. And we have Masdar Carbon, which is focusing on reduction of carbon through different elements, through using the clean development mechanism, CDM project and carbon projects around the world, and through the carbon capture and storage initiatives that we are working locally with our industries in the UAE. And our most famous initiative, Masdar City, which is that is focused on sustainable development from the design phase throughout the construction operation. We have achieved the first stage of the first phase of the city, and it's operational. Our first tenant is Masdar Institute of Science and Technology. Both the faculty, the labs, and the staff and the students live and study on board. We kind of have the first neighborhood through the Masdar Institute with our with our PRT, which is the personal rapid transport system, operating as a pilot for the bigger city. So as you see, it's a unique approach that addresses renewable energy from different elements. Associated with the initiative, we have two very strong and important programs that became more of an international and global. One of them is the World Future Energy Summit that we actually launched in 2008, and most recent, every year we have growing interest globally. And this year we had, just to give you an insight of type of speakers we receive in this event, we had Ban Ki-moon launching the sustainable energy for all year in the summit. We had the Premier of China, the Prime Minister of South Korea, and many others. So it's became a global event that we look at as a platform to advance renewable energy through collaboration, through innovation, through this partnership, and through having a platform dedicated to that. The other initiative which I'm blessed to be responsible about recently, which is the Zayed Future Energy Prize, and I'm very excited that I have next to me on the table is our this year winner, which for that achievement, Dr. Gadgil. So I'm going to speak about that a bit later. But when we talk about, there's always a debate about is clean technologies, is it making revenue? Is it actually a business model there? And I'm not gonna talk a lot about that because you've heard about it throughout the day. It is actually becoming more and more economically visible. But needs enablers in all societies. In developed countries, in developing countries, you need to have something that drives the renewable energy. Technology is one thing. You have to have a technology because innovation in technology at the long term is going to drive prices down through having the scale. You need to have the policies. From our experience, if you don't have a policy framework to support it is just going to be very challenging. And again, the financial elements that is key to make it happen, even on in least developed countries. When you have very cheap solution, or even for these cheap solutions, you need to have some financing model that supports very actually end user, which is extremely deprived, that even for the very cheap elements they cannot afford it. So you always have to have some kind of financial mechanism. And there are some early adapters. I'm just going to take you that because I can see that the focus is going to be on least developed countries. But countries that made it work have the regulatory policies, have the incentive scheme, and have the financial initiatives. So you have either to have all of this or a combination of it to make things work. And policies has to be have all the elements that make it work, which is predictability, transparency, responsiveness to market, and the rest. What are we doing? And as I said, we are doing so much in Masdar in a commercial level, but we are doing as well a lot of work to provide access for energy on least developed countries. One of our commitments this year to the Sustainable Energy for All, or the UE commitment that Masdar is mandated to do, is to build a grid-connected PV plant in Tonga that's going to supply 13% of the island's demand through solar energy. It's going to save 180,000 liters of diesel annually and 400 tons of carbon dioxide. We are now working to install an integrated solar home system with appliances to 600 households in 8 isolated villages in Afghanistan. Through our fund, we've developed a partnership with the Development Bank of Japan to make investment focused on solar and wind. And we are working with the government of Seychelles to install wind energy there to meet their growing local energy demand. And through the Zayed Future Energy Prize, we are providing financial reward and support to incentivize and promote innovation and leadership in renewable energy. Our prize have 5 categories, as was mentioned. Large corporation. For large corporation, we give them recognition award. Small medium enterprises, they receive $1.5 million. Non-government organizations, $1.5 million. Lifetime achievements for an individual, they receive $500,000. And very recently, now in a week time, we're going to launch the Global High School Award, which is again a commitment from the prize to the Sustainable Energy for All year that is going to be giving a prize, five total prizes, $100,000 each to 5 regions, the Americas, Europe, Africa, Oceania, and Africa. And our criteria is simple. It's you need to show long-term vision, leadership, innovation, and impact. Thank you very much. I look forward to your questions.
Thanks, Nawal. As you can see, an impressive portfolio nonetheless. The next speaker is Professor Ashok Gadgil. As Nawal just mentioned, he was the winner of the Lifetime Achievement Award at the Zayed Future Energy Prize this year. That would certainly imply that his interests are not strictly academic. He has actually done some things, including deploying new cooking apparatus, new programs, new technology into developing nations has really been the driving force behind some of that activity. So some tremendous activity going on that I'm sure Ashok is going to walk us through right now. Thanks, Ashok.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you. So Chris asked us, sorry, I want to full screen is, I'm a Mac guy, so I need some. Okay, so Chris asked us to first begin our slide presentation by telling you what our institutions are doing in the context of the topic for this session. Earlier this month, the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab announced creation of an institute called LIGHT. It's not misspelled, that's the way the acronym stands. It's the LBN Institute for Globally Transformative Technologies. Here the idea being that we would leverage the $800 million per year of research that we do in basic sciences and advanced applied sciences and do the last mile research to figure out how do we leverage our breadth and depth of knowledge to bring affordable energy services for the bottom 2 or 3 billion, economically bottom 2 or 3 billion people who are aspiring to follow our lifestyles in the West, who want to follow the high carbon trajectory to prosperity which the planet cannot afford. So you have the website up there. It is, but if you just Google the words LIGTT and LBNL, that should come up. So I want to start off by showing you the trajectory of our carbon emissions. And these are petagrams or gigatons per year of carbon emissions, not CO2, carbon. CO2 is a typo there. And you would see a very nice growth. The horizontal and vertical lines cross at about 6 gigatons a year, and that's the time of Kyoto. And we zoom right through Kyoto, and now we are from 6 gone up to 9 gigatons per year. Kyoto doesn't change even the slope of the curve, let alone the direction of the curve. Given that we have so many people without electricity, you saw that slide of the Earth at night. By end of the century, with population increase and inevitable rise in prosperity, we would expect that a planet will need maybe 3 times more energy per year. Okay? Historically, the net carbon emissions from the surface to the atmosphere have been plus minus 0.2 petagrams per year. And we are going to get to about 30 petagrams per year on the current trajectory using current technologies. I don't see how we are going to get from 30 to 0.2 unless something gives. Okay? So it's not just going to be technological advances, it's going to be catastrophe avoided with some kind of carbon tax. So my take is, in reflecting on the discussion of this morning, people want some certainty, that they want some assurance that there's going to be carbon tax in the future. I would bet there's going to be carbon tax in the future, because if my bet fails, we are all going to go down the tubes anyway. So I might as well bet that we'll survive. In that case, there is a carbon tax and I'll make my money. That's the way I would bet on what's going to happen. This is not a good, reassuring picture in terms of what the planet needs. This graph shows you the world divided as of 2007. In the top 800 million people in the first world, the vertical axis shows the Human Development Index, which is a United Nations peak of what people want. Okay? And this is not based on Western cultural norms. This is based on Human Development Index decided on what developing country people want. So each sector is divided per what people want in those population categories. On the horizontal axis is kilowatt hours per person annually in 2007. And you would see that 1 billion people, the line dividing 800 million and 1 billion goes right through Argentina. You can't see that, the text. And the line dividing 1 billion and the bottom 5 billion goes right through China. And all those guys at the bottom 5 billion are trying to become like us. And as you inevitably, if they follow the current technologies and trends, of course, kilowatt hours annually per person rises and we all become toast. So which is why the need to provide electrical access to these people, which we cannot stop, either ethically, morally, or technologically. We cannot stop it. But we better make our money figuring out how we are going to make that accessible to them at a price that they can afford with far lower carbon footprint. So rather than seeing this as a threat, this is an opportunity for our innovation, our technologies, our new materials. And it's not about electricity, it's about end use. It's about the use of electricity to deliver what they want. So there is a slight nuance in terms of what's going on there. This picture you already saw. Here is the population distribution for Asia, Africa, Latin America, and Eastern Europe. And you see the poorest two pockets are in Asia and Africa. And then the last slide essentially shows how these institutions have evolved in energy, telecom, transport. In every case there is industry, but there is also regulation, and it has taken 100 years to get it there, okay? In the developing world to get there, we don't have 100 years. So what's effectively going to happen is distributed access to services, which is highly low carbon in footprint. And this is where people took on solid fuels. So lastly, solid fuels is also maps on where the people are and where the poverty is. I would like to stop there and wait for more discussions. Thank you.
Last but not least, Russell Sturm is the head of the Climate Change Advisory for the International Finance Corporation. So a relatively significant investment arm of a global organization that really seeks out some of these opportunities to enable energy access, to enable water access, to enable some of the things that we're talking about. Russell, thanks.
Good afternoon. So where's the... there it is. So IFC is the private sector investment arm of the World Bank Group, and we invest every year about $18 billion last year. In addition, we have a advisory business. And so with this, what we seek to do, our mission, is to eliminate poverty by supporting private sector investment as the engine of economic development. We have a long history of having invested in a variety of business models that seek to support the private sector in delivering services not delivered by the public sector. And clearly that's the case in the scenario that Ashok just shared with us. And so what I intend to do is give insights that we've derived from this work over time, as well as a publication that will be coming out in a couple of months that looks behind the curtain of these dark areas for more of a granular view of what's going on there and what the dynamic is in those markets. And fundamentally, it's really about thinking about service delivery and segmenting the market. There is no bottom of the pyramid that is a monolithic thing. Within the bottom 2 billion people are 4 or 5 discrete markets with discrete levels of affordability and discrete needs. And so our analysis really is looking in terms of the type of technologies that are available today that are available at a price point that is a direct substitution for antiquated energy services, how people cook, how they light their homes, how they get basic services, how they get water. And so the discrete segments are looking at improving cook stoves such that it's less fuel used for the same service. The emergence of usually solid-state-based lighting products that are an appliance, basically. It's a consumer product. The expansion of that, which are solar kits, maybe 2 or 3 light points, slightly higher price point. Solar home systems where you have a TV or a radio along with a few light points, $500 to $1,000, a lot of the market can't be touched with that. And then microgrids where you have an energy source and it's a community-based power utility that's not grid connected but is as a unit of business. And then various models for extending the grid as we know it. And the critical thing is how you match technology and affordability to the market, to each of these markets. And this is a picture that talks in the left-hand column. I actually have a pointer. In the left-hand column here, this is the capital cost to put in place one of these systems. So a mini grid, maybe $50,000 to $500,000 gives you the infrastructure to provide electricity services, maybe 8 hours a day, into a community scenario. And going to the other end of the spectrum, solar lanterns, which high-quality ones that are certified by ISC's Lighting Africa program, available $20. And this is the levelized annual cost. So you see at each of these price points you have technologies that fit. And when you start to apply this into markets and you look at what people presently are spending. So this is looking at, $31 billion presently being spent for these basic services of cooking and lighting using kerosene, for example. So that's a market. It exists. $31 billion out the door for an inferior technology. And then you start to look at the emergent technologies here that can replace that. And what you add up to is ability to reach 375 million households. That's about 1.4 million people with present technology, given what they are presently paying for the worst stuff. So let's look at one, and what you have emergent, therefore, and these companies are profiled in the publication that'll be forthcoming, is at 3 different layers, a variety of different, each of these is companies that are operating, and these circles relate to how many people they're serving. So that's 500,000 people this company is serving. This whole level here is commercially operating companies working in each of those verticals. These are companies that may have some sort of business model based on a public-private partnership, and these are companies that have some sort of dependency on subsidy to make it work. But they're all operating at different segments of this market. Let's look at one of the verticals, lighting services. So this is about $38 billion a year, we estimate. I've seen estimates from $25 billion. It's a big market. People spending for kerosene. So this is ExxonMobil managing 15% of the global lighting market, right? And the people that are spending 15% of the lighting bill for the planet are receiving 0.2% of the lighting service. So what you have is the poorest paying by far the most for the worst. And this doesn't factor in the external costs related to health from indoor air pollution, fires, which are rampant in informal settlements, right? This is Evan Mills' picture from LBO. I thank you, Evan. So what is emergent is disruptive technology. So you look at the paradigm that I've laid out. People paying for this stuff. What are they paying? What is emerging as technology? How affordable is it? And you have a disruptive technology in solid-state lighting. That's a game changer. It's analogous to what has happened with telecom that makes available to people modern banking services and access to finance through M-Pesa in Kenya, which is the dominant financing vehicle in the Kenyan market. You segment this market and it stops looking like one. So if you look at 250 million households that rely on kerosene and fuels for lighting, you segment that and you realize there's about 50 million households that are spending more than $10 a month. When you extrapolate that and you start looking at over here, you've got about 112 million people that presently are a market for solar lanterns. Nothing has to change. Existing technology, get the product to the people, right? These are existing markets. 86 million can afford solar home systems given what they are paying today for their services. Many faces of the technology and the business models have emerged to address this. I'm giving an impressionistic introduction to the slides because I don't have time, but I want to leave some basic points here that the pictures reinforce a bit. When you look at these businesses, solar home systems we won't look at for a second. We will jump ahead to a mini utility because it's a completely different kind of model. Really interesting. This is a company in India that burns rice husks as their central generating plant. ISC is invested in this company. The margins are quite substantial in their business model. The key to this is having a low-cost, reliable source of biomass to generate the electricity, an adequate, dense population that you can distribute to in your little micro-utility scenario, and entrepreneurs that can deal with a relatively sophisticated business model. At the ecosystem level, what do they have to work? This is where the policy comes into play. First of all, they have to be able to operate. They have to be able to get a license to sell electricity, and there's a lot of markets where that door is shut. Why? Because government's going to provide it, but just not in my lifetime. Viable tariffs. They have to have a business model with revenues that'll pay the bills. It's not going to be 10 cents a kilowatt hour, but it's going to be cheaper than kerosene. They have to have long-term debt or debt that matches the tenor of the business proposition and their business model. And they have to be able to scale, which means they need to be able to open their next utility without waiting 3 years for licensing. And when they start having businesses like this, and I will close down in a second, Chris, when they start having businesses like this, in this market, all sorts of opportunities for synergies and partnerships emerge. This is a picture that imagines the scenario where Husk Power or any of these other micro utilities businesses partners up with mobile telecom companies that have a network of base stations. And these telecom companies need to power the base stations. They need to have about 1,200 watts to charge one of these remote systems and to power it. But they're not in the power business. They could give a darn about where it's coming from. They just want it to be reliable. They become the basis of an anchor tenant for a mini utility. So you got a deep pockets client that is taking your base load from you. And then you have the ability to sell to the consumer in the community and maybe have a public clinic or something or a school. But these sort of innovations emerge in this scenario. And as these companies develop, their needs change. So here you have the issues they face at the early stages when they're developing the concept. This is the R&D. This is the ARPA-E, right? Here you've got proof of concept. Who's going to take the venture capital risk? And at this end, scaling up, how do you make it go at scale? This informs those of us who are not entrepreneurs, but rather are trying to help drive and scale this stuff. What type of interventions do we do is informed by where the market is. Is it early stage? Is it middle stage? Is it later stage? It implies different type of interventions, grants for R&D, venture capital in here, and then long-term debt. Different interventions. You have to understand discretely the market, the business, and what their needs are. And what that translates into is significant impact. This picture is talking about the number of households at current prices, current scenarios that can be reached with no change. Both looking at the cook stove model and the lighting model. And so I leave with just one thought. I mean, we have this call to purpose, right? We have a lot of conditions in place. Unilever's taught us that the poor is a market. If you don't sell them a $6 bottle of shampoo, you sell them a 1 rupee sachet, they'll buy. There's the aspiration. You've got to package the service, whether it's light, heat, whatever the basic service is, at a price point that fits the market. But you have to understand the market. You can't come at it as if it's the United States. It's different. It's discrete. It has many different layers to it. And if we do that, we can bring in the modern light. We can change lives. And it's sustainable because people are making money doing it. Thank you.
Thanks, Russell. So what we'll do now, we've still got about 45 minutes left available for a panel discussion. But I do want to make sure we're going to have time, and a significant amount of time at the end, for people to ask their own questions, or you can actually tweet your questions as well, if you would care to. We'll go through a discussion, but as we'll start to get your questions ready in about 10 or 15 minutes, we'll hit the microphones, and this will be a chance for you to ask your questions of what you can see as a very qualified panel to talk about the idea of global energy access for all. So we'll start with a panel discussion first, but please be ready. If this one's live. So first question, if this one's live. There we go. Got it. Thank you. So there's a lot of discussion, different perspectives here. There's technology development, there's business model development, there's market needs, there is policy development. There are a range of different things that were discussed by the four of you. But which is actually, since we're at ARPA-E and we're talking about future energy, we're talking about advancing technology, where do you think the critical needs are? Is it policy, is it different policy, is it business models, or is there genuine technology development that you're seeing that you're identifying that's going to address a critical gap? Maybe, Johanna, I'll start with you, given you're very much at the technology end of the spectrum.
Yeah, so I think it's all of the above. I don't know that you can separate and just pick one. You're probably not going to see the movement that we'd like to see if you just focus on policy or economics or technology. You really need it all. Like I said, I am much more familiar with the technology aspect of it. Like I said, we've come a significant way, and so I do think that there are really economically viable solutions today that didn't exist, say, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. But there's a long way to go. There's a lot more opportunity that we can do. And because this is an advanced research summit here, I guess I challenge the folks that are out there is as we move those dials, some of them have needs in the developed world, but there's lots of opportunity to extend into the developing world as well.
Yeah, maybe Russell, if you have anything to add.
Not much more to add to that.
It is all the above, and I could elaborate on those pieces of it, but policy. The policy that I'd like to see is policy that's not impediment to letting the private sector go. I mean, I work a lot in Africa, and the entrepreneurial energy and creativity is just stunning. I mean, you create a rule, and the energy that goes into going around that rule is just inspiring. And if you take away the rule and you just simply create the opportunity, it's even more inspiring what can happen. So that would be my plea.
Ashok, maybe with some of the work that you've done with I know the cook stove programs, I think you've done some work in Bangladesh. That's not high technology that you deployed. So how did you identify that, and what was the process for seeing that and monetizing it and building the partnership, building the network that you saw there?
I think we probably are in all agreement across the panel that we don't want to simply take a technology that works in the U.S. and throw it over the fence, saying now you take it and goodbye, good luck. This is because it works here, that's what you need. The cultural needs and expectations are so different across the globe based on not just culture but economic priorities and the stratification and the conditions in which people live, that you want the smartest brains to innovate based on known technologies which we understand well, but to do the last mile that is appropriate for the target population. I mean, one example would be Nuru Lights, is a little company that takes nickel hydride batteries packaged with LED lamps, and they make a cube of it. And you just buy the cube. The cube has the battery and the lamp, and it's all sealed with only 2 contacts sticking out. But the contacts can be plugged onto a stationary bike, and you charge the bike, you charge that cube, and then it lights up for 300 times longer than the duration of your pedaling. So you are effectively able to get your light just by pedaling on a little stationary bike. But a simple idea. But nobody in the US would imagine that product being useful here. Right? But so there is the technology. Underlying physics is the same, but it's tuning it to the people who really need it.
Yeah, please, Russell. Yeah.
So in a lot of ways, Ashok and I are brothers of a different mother. Our thinking has paralleled it through our careers in a lot of ways. And what Ashok just described was this creative energy that requires understanding of its market was been the motivation and the insight, I think, of the Lighting Africa program in IFC, which is we had gone to the LED industry and said, do you realize there's a $38 billion market that Exxon has, that you have a superior technology? What do you think? And they said, we want it. And then we said, well, what do you need? And they said, we need to understand the market. So we did in-depth market assessments, and we did consumer focus groups, and we did field testing, and came out of this with generic information about affordability, form factor, how long people need light, how they use light, how they could charge, what are the issues around charging, what is the issues around the environment in which it must work, and put it out there in a generic form. A year later, we have an industry meeting in Kenya, and there's booths full of products not made for the German camping market that was shipped, but rather the Korean guy who came up to me so excited. He said, "Look what I built." His first visit to Africa, but he had gone through each point of our market assessment, and he had built a device for the market at a price point that the market needed, and he just needed to be introduced to a distribution channel to go. So it's this notion, Ashok, that about helping the creative minds, no matter where they are on the planet, to understand the market is the way to bridge. And we talk about technology transfer. It's not as formal as that. It's about opportunity gates being opened for the developer and for the market.
I just want to add a comment. We heard about a flat earth being the competition, say, software developers in India give to American kids here. But the flat earth works both ways. The Korean guy listens to the IFC specs and takes a product to Kenya and is able to be to the market first with a better quality product than anybody else could. So it's indeed a flat earth, but the advantage is to the innovator.
Yeah, and it's no coincidence that China's invested more money into Africa than the World Bank in the last year for potentially exactly the same reasons, finding opportunity. Nawal, I wanted to switch across to you because obviously Masdar sees, as a group, sees opportunity, sees a need for technology, sees a need for deployment, and that really is made more concrete by the Future Energy Prize. When it comes to the Future Energy Prize, you're looking for innovators, but what are the things that you're looking for in terms of that prize that then correspond to global energy access for all? Are you looking for technology? You know, tell me what really drives sort of the way you evaluate technologies, the way you evaluate sort of the types of proposals that you see.
It gets evaluated, as I said, on the four criteria. It's the leadership, it's the innovation, it's the impact, and it's the long-term vision. So it's not something that basically an organization can come up with one solution that only works once and then like in a few months the whole thing's going to disappear. It's not a technology that's going to be basically an end user is going to be excited about it for 2 days and then they're going to shelf it and nobody's going to use it. So what we look at is the impact that this technology or this company had on the society, had maybe on the industry, had in influencing others to make changes. For example, one of our winners was the Carbon Disclosure Project. Carbon Disclosure Project do not make technologies themselves, but what they did is they made organizations, big companies, report on their emissions and hence had to enhance it. So they drove change by an innovative kind of approach towards sustainability. One of our finalists was Neuro Energy. One of our winners was Orb Energy. So it's what is this technology doing in its context and how it's improving either access to energy, providing a solution, improving an issue or a conflict or a concern that has a long-term implication on the future energy, renewable energy more specifically. So it's a combination of many things, but mainly how this technology or how this company or how this individual is leading to change a challenge that is affecting all of us now.
Right. Thanks, Nawal. I guess I'll come back to you, Johanna, in terms of some of the work that's going on in GE. You know, it's the same sort of idea. What do you look for? How do you assess the opportunities? How do you find the opportunities when you're buried in the research center, sort of separate from, maybe a little disconnected from the market? One of the interesting things you raised was, a lot of activities going on in Schenectady or in Niskayuna, but you have a global research team in Shanghai and Bangalore and Munich and soon in Brazil. How many of these programs, these technology programs, are going to transfer across to developing nations or to those economies and to those teams to allow for a more sort of localized solution and localized knowledge to be developed? Is that going to happen much at all?
Well, I guess I don't necessarily have it broken out that way. So first of all, we try very, very hard to be connected to our markets, and that's part of why we do have local presence in many of the markets where we're developing. I wish there was a secret recipe for innovation. If it was, I'd probably be a billionaire and maybe not sitting here, but It's a lot of hard work. I think some folks have talked about it before. We do a lot of bottoms up, here's the challenge. What are the great ideas, as well as, trying to seed some different ideas or some different challenges that are there. Like I said, what's fantastic about working for General Electric is that we do have such a broad portfolio of offerings, both in the energy, and although we're not talking about water, I think that's just as big of a challenge as energy space. And so, I think a lot of the renewable technologies are very transferable into developing regions for the specific reasons that they don't necessarily require infrastructure. The sun, the wind's there. It can be very local. A lot of the smart grid technologies, which can be used, say, for example, in a military base in the United States, could also be used for a developing village in Africa. So I think there's lots of technology in the pipeline. I've been impressed in my short time at GRC, having spent years in the business, at how far we've been able to move the ball forward. And I think as I look out over the next decade, I think the one thing that I predict is that the pace of change has certainly increased, and I think it will continue to increase, and I think it'll be very exciting.
If people want to sort of line up at microphones with questions whenever you're ready, and that's actually pretty quick work by that gentleman, so please go ahead.
I'm Dr. Sam Hancock of Emerald Planet TV, and we have a worldwide movement called the Power for Peace, where we want to push down the technology to the household level for energy, water, and food production. And so this is to Dr. Al-Hosany, and then also to Dr. Gadgil and Russell. But what can we do to match, say, the innovation awards that you're trying to do through your foundation, which seems to really be reaching out to the world, to very inexpensive technologies, so that up front we're looking at the very needs of the people, but matching it with the technology instead of trying to spend years doing this, but how do we more quickly match it? Because, as you know, about 2 billion people need it now, not in 5 or 10 years. So any ideas that you have, we certainly would appreciate it. Thank you very much.
So I guess the answer is don't try to do it top-down by government regulation and policy. Make it profitable, and you would be able to move finance capital to come in. So just to give one particular concrete illustration, one of my inventions for disinfecting drinking water really inexpensively, that you get WHO or US EPA standard drinking water out of a dirty pond or a dirty stream for 2 US cents per gallon. This invention is now for profit. This is 2 cents per gallon is for profit. Okay. There is a for-profit company, an American company, serving 5 million people water using that technology in Asia and Africa in 6 different countries, with investments including from IFC, from Johnson & Johnson, Dow Chemicals, and so on. But the key point is none of this would have been possible top-down if UN had ordered it, but it becomes possible if innovation meets business. And the key point there is for the innovators to bear in mind what's the price point at which it will actually work in the market, and what's the business model innovation, so that it will be self-propelling and will go to scale.
I totally agree. I think it's very much, it's the key is who is going to be your main customer, and try to shape or design your technology to meet such this customer, and to basically approach them through all the ways. Most of the submissions we received related to technology and small scale technologies, actually that was the only way forward. It's, designing the product to meet an actual need and address it in a way that makes it is commercially feasible for them to access it.
Maybe this microphone here.
David Karmelnikov. I'm at the Institute for Village Resiliency, which is a tribal consortium based at the Alaska Pacific University. We represent several communities who are being displaced from climate change and who live in energy poverty. I would like to know how you feel that Alaska, who is supposedly within the United States boundaries, yet experiences many developing world conditions, how we could use that strategic niche market for deploying these emerging technologies, and especially with these communities relocating in the next few years, how we can use those as demonstration projects for sustainability, such as Masdar has shown.
Anyone want to take that?
Well, I'll just say, probably similar to Alaska, Canada has a lot of very remote communities that are also not attached to the grid. And in fact, there was recently a demonstration project there where we did set up a microgrid where we're able to pull in several different resources to power local communities. And I think taking that as a pilot and expanding it across remote regions that are in North America, as you point out, there's quite a few, is something that, should be done. Also, Alaska is very rich in biomass resources. And, there's also lots of opportunity to utilize those resources in an environmentally sensible way to generate electricity using modern technologies that are actually becoming very efficient.
Good afternoon, Guy with Intel. I think the basic question is, to what extent are you shooting ahead of the duck or behind the duck? And then let me explain that. If you were to design the grid today, it would be DC. That's where 80% of your load is. That's where your renewable, carbon-free energy sources are. Yet we're constrained to the AC grid we've got here in the developed world. That's not a constraint in the developing world. Is that an approach or a balancing act you have to make when you're designing for these markets? Or is this a case of like one laptop per child where you actually ended up having the developed world being led by the developing world where that need arose and led to smaller, atom-based chips that ended up driving notebooks into netbooks and then finally ultrabooks?
So just to clarify, do you want a specific answer to the DC question, or are you looking more for the more general leapfrog?
Yeah, really more for what are the guiding principles on are you pioneering out there to maybe thinking and bringing it into the developed world, or are you constrained to think of the old assumptions and constraints?
So
when you take those in.
Leapfrogging developing nations. Russell, you want to take a swing at that one?
You're not constrained, and that's the beauty of not having an infrastructure. That's what's happened with mobile telecoms. You don't have to string up a continent with new technology to provide communication services or energy services. But the constraint on the grid expansion for Africa, let's say, relates to capital costs. It relates to, because remember, when the U.S. electrified and had universal access, heavy subsidy to go outside the cities. It is not intelligent use, one could say, of constrained capital to string up rural areas. The microgrid type models start to look interesting, but so the grid's expensive. But in the African context, it's not even just about capital. It's about dysfunctional institutions that impair the ability to build things like that. And so, yes, it's an open field, and the solution for Africa or the solution for more remote areas of East Asia will reflect what's going on there, and it should. Because of just basic realities. But that's also an opportunity. And the emergence of disruptive technologies in that context means that we do need to imagine a different outcome than if we were just simply to U.S.ify the infrastructure there.
My name is Ralph Allen. I'm Secretary General of the International Green Energy Council. We are a worldwide advocacy organization with charter chapters in 68 countries, consultants to 14 nations on energy policy, and projects going on in 28 nations. My first comment is an invitation evolving into a question. Last Earth Day, our organization released an initiative called the GEC Feed the World Coalition,
which is a collaboration of nations and disruptive green technologies that can be incorporated into water, agriculture, livestock, and aquaculture for the future of world population. I'd like to invite you all to be collaborative partners in that initiative. My question is, the Al-Noor Cities project, the 2 sustainable cities to be built in the future by the Bin Laden Construction Corporation in Djibouti and Yemen, obviously Djibouti will take place first. Have you done any pro forma calculations in regards to the new scale of economics that bridge connecting Africa to Asia now will create new green economies to both the continents involved?
Who was that question to specifically? Was it?
The questions to any of the panelists in regards to calculating the new scales of economy that the Al-Noor Cities project and the bridge construction that connect finally Africa to Asia and its implications to any of these microfinancing or third world country energy applications.
Seeing a lot of shaking heads of Nawal.
Well, I don't know much about that project specifically, but any bridging between 2 continents, I'm sure it's going to create a lot of opportunities. And that goes, generally, but specifically about this initiative, I'm not sure I know a lot of details, but as a rule of thumb, that's definitely going to happen.
Okay. Thank you. Al-Noor Cities. Do some research on it. Pretty incredible project.
Thanks. Okay.
Hi there, my name's James Barlow. I work with the National Collegiate Inventors and Innovators Alliance. We provide grant funding and training for actually quite a few of the examples that have been up here: Husk Power, Promethean Power, D-Light, Greenlight Planet, etc. One of the things that we've found in supporting very early stage technologies that come out of universities in this space is that getting beyond the initial high opportunity density area that they start. How do you build up and scale these ventures? And you mentioned about distribution channels, distribution networks. You're operating within clusters of innovation with multiple different kinds of products. Could you maybe speak to examples that you've seen where that's been done very, very well? How other organizations have overcome some of those things? Because it is, for a lot of our grantees, the biggest challenge they face. How do they scale up past that first village, that first community they start working with, and do that in a capital efficient, business focused fashion?
So, you guys at NCIA are doing a fantastic job. I think it's one of the real sparks for innovation at our college students, and I haven't seen anything comparable to that across United States anywhere. The 2 weaknesses common to U.S. educational system in technological areas. One is we don't teach people that it is normal to fail when you try new things. We teach them with textbooks, and textbooks have problem sets, and the problem sets always are designed to be soluble problems, right? So we train people with expectation that problem that they will run into when they leave the textbook is going to be soluble. Sorry, buddy. That's not how the real world works. So enormous intellectual stamina and ability to fail, I don't know, maybe 80, 90, 100 times before you get to success is one thing that we don't train. Second thing we don't train people is they don't know what they don't know, which is the worst kind of situation to be in. So the technical people don't realize that marketing and financing and cash flow analysis are going to make or break their business. And NCIA at least tries to do some of that. But if you are going to be successful in turning bright, really bright American kids into successful inventors and entrepreneurs, we got to figure these things out.
So you were asking, I love the sociological analysis of our education system. You were asking, I think also, though, about distribution models that are working?
Distribution models and examples of where we see a lot of lone wolves trying to go out and solve problems by themselves. Yeah. But the example you gave was about integrated community solutions. And it's a really hard thing. There aren't many real guiding lights who've managed to pull that off. With looking at cooking, lighting, power, all of those kind of things in a single place, because the last mile of infrastructure, getting out beyond those high areas of opportunity density is really tough.
So the analytical work I made reference to that we will publish as soon as we can get a copy-ready version together, which I think is within 2 months, just looked at about 100 companies in these segments that we talked about to see who's getting traction and why. And I'll just say that, one small group of these is 20 or so companies that are engaged with Lighting Africa. It's an open door. We provide information and certification. So those companies with real commitment that have walked in the door, maybe 20, there's probably 15 different distribution models among them. And that's okay, right? It's not just okay because it's an experimental phase, but it's okay because the market is not monolithic. And so one of the things that's emerging right now is, and it's different by market, in Kenya there is a pretty well-established microfinance industry. And what they have evolved to is retailers of consumer products. So they basically provide, you go to a microfinance office in some areas of Kenya, and you go in and it's a showroom of all the products that you can buy on credit, on time. And so they've engaged with Lighting Africa, these companies, because they want products that they can certify, because they're exposed for 1 year. If the product fails when it goes out the door, they're hosed. So so that's one model that's getting traction, but it's not going to exist in markets where there's not a microfinance industry. So it's really local specific. And what does that say then about a company with the technology? GE, you want to blanket the planet with your products? Well, you're not in the consumer product business, right? So you're looking for institutions and at that scale. But if you're a consumer products company, I'm not so sure you could just go online and say we're here, we're open for business. You will have to make a commitment to specific markets. And given that the U.S. market is flat, you better do that.
Yeah, and there's an aggregation issue associated with that as well. So that's the microfinance side. But a lot of times the telecommunications, the mobile telecommunications value chain has established a lot of the network that actually needs to be built out in a lot of these locations anyway. And there's a tremendous amount of stuff, technology you can bolt on to a mobile telecommunications infrastructure. And we've seen a sort of a great deal of that that's out there. At the opposite end, I've seen a project in Africa that has 5 independent solar systems attached in a village, each serving a different need, each of which were installed by a different provider. One was attached to a healthcare facility, another was attached to a school, another was attached to the telecommunications infrastructure, and went on and on and on. And there was no aggregation there. It was a bunch of lone wolves going after it. But I think there is efficiency in aggregation. I think the aggregation, the channels for that already exist in a lot of places. Maybe not microfinance is the obvious one, but I think there are other good vehicles out there as well. So I believe we have a Twitter question. Yes. We should take that since someone actually typed.
This is more on a broad question, but what's the main factor limiting access to energy? Is it cultural acceptance, funding, infrastructure?
Anyone? Cultural acceptance, funding, infrastructure, the main barrier to sort of acceptance of energy.
All of the above.
Yeah, all of the above, yeah.
No one here. I guess it's location by location, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I agree, because in some cases, like the cases that we faced in Masdar, sometimes it's you have the funding, you're actually going to fund that project as a government. The government want to fund a project in one of the least developed countries, but it gets to be a challenge that nobody want to go and build it there, and then there is no information. Like you want to go and build you want to decide, you want to build a solar farm or you want to build a wind farm. You need some information about the renewable energy readiness in this country, and nobody gives you this information. It gets to be very challenging. Sometimes you can access the information, but most of the time it's a huge challenge. And sometimes the government in that country itself is the barrier for a reason or another. So it depends on each case, it depends on each country, but it is a different challenge every time.
Okay. Maybe over here.
My name's David Ferris. I'm a journalist, write for Sierra Magazine, Forbes, Popular Mechanics. And I was interested in the comment, Russell, you made about how people in developing countries, the government erects a rule and everyone finds their way around it. And I think our assumption around developing countries is that the government's going to be slow to respond and corrupt and unresponsive. And I was just wondering, do you have any instances, any of you, of countries where the government has smelled the money and started to respond?
Starting to respond?
I don't have first-hand knowledge, but I read a great story about Vietnam that went from 50% folks that had access to energy in 1996 to near to 100% today. And it was, I think as folks had mentioned here, it was because several different things aligned. They had made it a national priority. They were able to achieve financing. They happened to be relatively rich in hydro resources, and I think they did it by extending the grid. So that's one example.
A compelling story right now in Africa is Rwanda, which has religion on the role of the private sector to support to enable economic development. And interestingly, the government at the legislative level is largely women. And I don't know. I didn't say it. I didn't say what. But it is in a lot of ways, Rwanda is an interesting place right now. And if when you see the dynamism in the market, it is in part because the government is decided to be an enabler and not just the force that is the market.
The other example that I've seen, you could look at a country like Morocco, which has a sizable amount of renewable energy deployment going on right now. And the root cause for that is Morocco was a tremendous net importer of fossil fuel energy. And in fact, the Moroccan government had spent a vast amount of their budget subsidizing fossil fuels to make them cheaper and more available to the general population. So in actual fact, their adoption of renewable technology was in some ways akin to sort of the theme we've heard here about energy security. And not only energy security, but actually reducing the budget bill for the government on a yearly basis by putting in an upfront investment into renewable energy. So there are examples out there, and that's actually one way of looking at some of these opportunities. How much is the government actually spending on fossil fuel subsidies? Because if you can take that out of their budget, then that's a natural spend they might make. Back to the point that Russell, you made. Identify what the current spend is, and then identify what a potential solution is that fits within that current spend. I think you can see that at every level, the village level, all the way up to the government level.
A notable example of grid expansion that's really gotten traction is Ghana. And they're close to 90% now from, I want to say 50 not too long ago. And it's not a reliable grid. There's inadequate power. It's not 24-hour a day by any stretch in Accra. But they have made a commitment. And interestingly, in that context, that was one of the two Lighting Africa pilot countries. In that context, with the grid coming on, it's the favored option. But the off-grid lighting product is necessary as a backup. And so you still hear the diesel gen sets going off across the city and the wealthier areas, and the solar lanterns become a fill.
Hey, just one other thing. We've been doing a lot of talking about governments, but there's a lot of great entrepreneurial examples as well. We sold, for example, in South America, reciprocating engines to a landfill company that was able to capture the gas and use it to power in a weak grid area. So I think it's really a combination. When we talked about all of above, there's a lot of cases where governments have taken a very active role, and there's a lot of entrepreneurial examples as well.
Just to add one small thing, actually, most African countries recently signed a communique in the International Renewable Energy Agency General Assembly And most these African countries has decided that they are going to take some solid steps towards renewable energy through, policy improvement and setting the enablers kind of environment for renewable energy. And this document is available online in the International Renewable Energy Agency website, and it just states which countries signed for it and who is going to start with it.
My name is Chad Lipton with National Geographic. Russell, I appreciate your passion. Actually, it's very inspiring. I just wanted to point that out. One of the comments that you made, you talked about trying to understand the market and the people that do their due diligence. That is a key. I guess in some ways it seems like that's a key between success and failure in many cases. The question I have for pretty much anyone, and Russell, if you have any insight into this, that'd be great. Is there any suggestion that you have for how to try to identify people who have done that? The reason why I ask is because we have a grant program, and so we fund early stage entrepreneurs in clean energy, and so sometimes it seems like it's a no-brainer, but it's not always easy to tell. And so, yeah, if you have any insight into how you try to figure that out.
There are two IFC colleagues here. In the new business, we've developed Clean Tech Investment, which is seeking to be earlier stage than IFC traditionally does. So typically, IFC doesn't efficiently make an investment less than $20 million, and so that's someone else's business. We created a Clean Tech Investment business. I don't know, are any of my colleagues here? Nikunj, Sean? Okay. So to specifically get better at this, right? But it's not easy. Particularly, we have pretty rigid, I would say, I don't know if it's rigid, I would say strong requirements because we don't want to lose money when we invest. We made $2 billion of profit last year as IFC. That's to sustain the institution and support a lot of the work that we do that's not commercial. But you're asking how you find the companies to support, the right ones?
Not so much how you find them. I assume a lot of them come and knock on your door. Without actually going out into the field and seeing your work, because if you're going to have dozens of applicants, you can't go and see all their work. But
how do you buy something without kicking the tires? You don't. I don't think you do. I don't think you do.
I totally agree. You got to go in the field.
Yeah.
All right.
Hi, Kareem Farhad from Stanford University. Since we're thinking globally, my question is actually about trade, and specifically I want to talk about the recent international trade dispute between the United States and China. So I want to get the insight specifically from the IFC and from GE perspective. Do you think such kind of disputes are going to be acting as, if you want, an incentive to stimulate local energy innovation, or do you think they're going to act as hurdles that will block the transfer of energy innovation through countries?
Who China?
Yeah.
Can you restate it as you understand the question? Or go ahead and answer it. Yeah.
Is your question, are trade disputes going to foster more innovation or take away from it? Is that the question?
Right.
Care to go on record?
Well, first of all, just to reiterate, I am from the research arm of General Electric and not necessarily the most well-versed on international trade disputes. From a technology, in fact, from a technology perspective, I guess I don't know how to answer your question. I just don't.
Trade disputes don't help transferring anything, and they don't help investment. I mean, and when politics enters, so I described a picture of a market that is organic, right? This is what is happening, and and when you put an overlay of politics driven by strategic interests of nation states. We're talking about people, right? We're talking about people without energy. and they live in a territory that is governed by a nation state that has strategic interests. Very often those strategic interests do not focus on the individual people who don't have the energy. So it's a different motivation, right? There's all of our countries have different objectives that we're trying to work in parallel. You point one of them out, and I'd say the manifestation of that is a complicating factor that impedes what we're trying to make happen at the person level. That's a personal comment, not an IFC comment.
I would say the short answer is no. It doesn't affect innovation at all. It affects manufacturing. Because most of the trade disputes that are in place are on goods and services that are at scale and are being transported across borders. So it's balance of trade stuff where you're claiming dumping or you're trading commodity or some sort of commoditized good, like a solar module, which is good a commodity these days. But it doesn't affect innovation because innovation occurs much earlier. It doesn't affect, it's separate innovation and invention as well, because innovation is so much broader than just invention. But there are entrepreneurs everywhere around the world, right? And entrepreneurs are going to keep chasing the big nut to go and make money. And they'll figure out whatever means it is to make money and whatever construct they actually have. So it's more going to affect the location of manufacturing, the localization of manufacturing to the markets they're actually targeting. But innovation not affected at all. That's just my take.
Hi, my name is Lucas Walton. I'm recently out of Colorado College. I was wondering, what would be your thoughts on larger, more capital-intensive systems? Desert tech is my primary example that involve both developing countries and developed countries. And how much of that capital, if any of it, reaches down to the local level where the energy is produced versus those who receive the energy. Do you like those models? Do you think those models are good for the people involved in them?
Desert tech?
The tech is not Masdar. I think you need such a model when you want to have a large scale, like such a scale project. You definitely need to have a more of a complicated model. It's different when you want to just do a small project. So I'm not involved in the details of the project because it's not Masdar. But what we see of it so far is I can't really judge it from any way because I haven't been involved in it on a personal level. But what we read about it, what we see about it, you cannot say another way to do it. I don't know. Do you want to have a comment?
And I'm not familiar with the project, that specific project either. But if you're talking about large centralized power, is that what it is? So I think it's a variety of solutions, and you got to look at the specific geography and the local restrictions. There are some cases in which that is the best answer. It's the most economically viable. It doesn't necessarily mean that the policy and everything else lines up, but there are some cases in which that's the right solution. There's some cases in which it's not. And I think what's great about the world today is that there are a portfolio of options, and you just need to line it up with the specific situation.
Okay, we're pretty much out of time right about now. I think we're basically bang on 5 o'clock. I'd like to thank everyone, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you for attending, but please join me in thanking the panel as well.